Okay, now go ahead and open your foldable up. And we're going to start by just focusing on the top part here. So if I look on this side, it says, given a function g of x, describe the transformation to h of x. All right, what I want you to remember is what our parent function is. Our parent function, this g of x equals x squared, okay? It will always be x squared. And it wants us to say what will happen. We're describing the transformation. So if I look at the first question, it says h of x equals g times 3x, or g of 3x is inside parentheses. Okay, remember parentheses means horizontal. Parentheses means horizontal. Everything in the parentheses is horizontal. Okay. So if I were to write this equation, actually first, let's take a step back. It says I have 3 times x. Let's look back at the front part of your notes. Okay, that looks a lot like this. And where b is, I have a 3. Okay, so 3 is definitely greater than 1. And down here it says horizontal shrink or compression, and it's going to be narrower. So let's go ahead and write that down. This is going to be a horizontal shrink. It's going to be a horizontal shrink or compression. And it's by a factor of, all right. Before I tell you what it's by a factor of, I want you to remember that everything in the parentheses is a liar, okay? It's always the opposite. It's always a liar. It's always going to lie to you. So the factor actually isn't 3 like you would think. It's 1/3. We have to change it to a fraction. It's actually taking the reciprocal. So it's by a factor of 1/3. And we said earlier that this is going to make it narrower. Than g of x. Narrower than g of x. All right, now we're still checking things in Desmos. But when you check it in Desmos, you can't type it exactly as it's written right here. So when I type it into Desmos, this is going to be y equals, we need our parentheses, x for 3x squared. Okay, when I write it into Desmos, I'm going to write it just like this with the parentheses and the squared on the outside. So let's go to Desmos. All right, and I'm going to start with my parent function, y equals x squared. And I'm going to make it black. That way it's really easy for us to see. Done. Okay, that's our parent function. And the function we're looking at now is y equals parentheses 3x parentheses squared. Okay, we said it was going to be narrower, and it is. Notice how this blue one right here is narrower. Let's make it orange. Okay, notice how it is narrower than the other. So let's go back. Let's try the next one. Number 2, h of x equals g of negative x. All right, let's see what we found, or what it told us over here. All right, sine of b is, if b is less than 0 and it's negative, that means it has a reflection in the y-axis, a reflection across the y-axis. So that told me my answer for this. Reflects across y-axis. And I want to show you what that looks like in your computer. So if I were to rewrite this, it would look like y equals negative x squared. So if I type this into Desmos, y equals negative x squared. Notice it's just like my black one. Because it's reflecting across the y-axis here, nothing's really changing. However, it is still reflecting across the y. You just can't really tell. All right, number 3. Okay, I have a 1/2 in B's spot. So if I come back here, it tells me that if B is a number between 0 and 1, it's a horizontal stretch, which means that it's going to be wider. So we're going to say horizontal stretch by a factor of, and remember everything in here is opposite, so it's not 1/2, it's going to be 2. It's a horizontal stretch, which tells me that it's going to be wider than g of x. All right, we can always check it in Desmos. I'm going to rewrite over here how we would write that. It would be y equals parentheses 1/2 x squared. So if I go to Desmos, I now have 1/2 x squared. It is wider than my parent function. All right, all we have is one more. Number 4, g of 2/3 x. G of 2/3 x. So because this follows this rule, it's between 0 and 1. It's a fraction smaller than 1. It's between 0 and 1. It's going to be a horizontal stretch again. So horizontal stretch. By a factor of and remember, we have to do the opposite. What's inside the parentheses is a liar. I have to flip this fraction. So instead of it being 2/3, it's going to be 3/2 that it's stretching by a factor of. That's also the same, you can say, or 1.5. It's the same thing. Okay, and because it's a horizontal stretch, it's going to get wider. So it's wider than g of x. The last thing I have to do here is write my equation. Y equals parentheses 2/3 x close parentheses squared. All right, last one, we're just going to go ahead and double check and graph. We'll change this 2/3. Okay, and it got wider, just a little bit wider than my parent function.